welcome back to Inside Blue 360, where we give law enforcement a voice. With us today is Joe Imperatrice, a sergeant with the NYPD and founder of Blue Lives Matter, and Bob Mladinich. He's also one of the smallest stars in The Irishman, where he worked with Al Pacino and Robert De Niro. You may recall, if you see the movie, Big Bob was the bodyguard for the individual who gets whacked in a barber chair. Welcome, Bob. Welcome, Joe.
Thanks, Ed. Just one correction. De Niro, Pesci, they work with me.
There we go. Now we work with you. So anyway, welcome. Joe, we're glad you were able to make it. And, I've been watching you for the last couple of years, build Blue Lives Matter. And I thought it'd be a good idea for us to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about Blue Lives Matter, how it got started. I mean, we were talking a little bit earlier. What made you come to the conclusion it's time to start Blue Lives Matter?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for asking me to come on. You do a lot of things for our sergeants in New York City, and you stand up when sometimes other people or other unions don't, and that means a lot to a lot of these people out there. Nowadays, everyone's politically correct. Everyone's afraid to say the truth, and the SBA and yourself, you go out there, and whether people like it or not, you bring the truth to a forefront, and that's what we need. We need more of that nowadays, so I want to thank you.
Thank you.
It's not easy every single day when you're defending people or defending the sergeants, and I came out with an individual named Russell Timoshenko back in 2006, and Russell was the only child of a Russian immigrant family that came here, and he became a police officer, and we worked in the 7-0 precinct together, and he'd work nights and I'd work days, and we'd say hello and goodbye. And 2007, Russell was in the 7-1 precinct, as a lot of cops will remember, and him and Herman Yan pulled over a stolen BMW X5, didn't know it was stolen at the time, and he gets out the car and 3 individuals open fire, and Russell passed away 5 days later. And I wanted to do something then, I just didn't know how. And starting new and taking over an organization, it's sometimes hard because people wonder why you're doing it, why your ideas are the way they are. And then 2014 was probably at a head when individuals were completely against the police officers nationwide. You had Ferguson, Missouri with the Michael Brown incident. You had Baltimore. We had Eric Gardner with Danny Pantaleo out here. And every single day there was a negative story in the press and in the news. And I said, we have to do something. And then I went to Ramos's funeral, after Ramos and Lou were assassinated, December 20, 2014. I saw police officers from all over the nation supporting one of the largest police departments in the world, and they make Hollywood movies about us. But then everyone goes their own separate ways. And I said, well, how do we unite individuals? And we came out with these wristbands. It said Blue Lives Matter on it. And the goal was just to give it to the delegates, to give it to the families. And within 2 weeks, we raised over $10,000. And right away, I sat down with a lawyer, and I didn't know anything about a nonprofit. And I said, you know what? I like what I hear, and I give my credit card. And we started with $3,700 out of my own pocket. And 5 years later, we've raised over $1.2 million.
Wow.
We've been able to help officers all over the nation. I'm a Fox News contributor, which is just amazing to be able to speak on behalf of law enforcement everywhere. And, I don't think there's an end in sight. What I say is there's something pushing this, and God has a plan, and I'm in the vehicle. I'm going to go wherever he takes me. So the goal is just to keep on doing positive things.
Well, you certainly have grown Blue Lives Matter, and there is a need to talk about the importance of Blue Lives Matter. And, for people who may wonder, it may not be too many of you that do, but Blue Lives Matter is, the lives of police officers, the uniform of blue. And, you mentioned Timoshenko. I mean, he was pretty much just gunned down as he got out of his car.
Correct, at 23 years old.
Then Officer Ramos and Lou, that 2014 time period, Ferguson, Gardner, all of this stuff escalating and getting, really out of control. That kind of created the movement for Black Lives Matter.
Correct.
And that became a huge message nationwide. I mean, we've seen protests all over the country. Right here in New York City, we had protests up and down Broadway, streets being tied up, bridges being closed, police officers being assaulted. And there was even a chant for killing cops and, pigs in a blanket, fried them. That escalated for a period of weeks under Commissioner Bratton, under Mayor de Blasio, and it got worse and worse as time went by, to the point that this inaction that I describe as inaction that neither one of those two individuals who were in charge of controlling the city took any kind of action to enforce law and order, I believe as many cops do, probably as many people in the city do, led to the assassinations of Ramos and Lou. Two officers in uniform sitting and eating their lunch, gunned down, shot in the head multiple times by a deranged individual that came out of Baltimore purely to kill cops. From that came the birth of Blue Lives Matter. And if I'm correct, it was right around that time. There was a major push.
It was, correct.
And you dug in to do that. Did you get resistance when this happened?
You absolutely did. And the word people like to throw out when they don't understand something is racist or racism. And being a police officer, I say it's like being the all-star team of the United States. There's everyone from all different backgrounds and walks of life and sexual orientations, religions, and the problem is people don't look past the uniform. They just see the uniform, as we saw Ramos and Lou, and that individual that came from Baltimore and took public transportation and put on his social media, he's going to have pigs fly. And the saying you were talking about is, what do we want? Dead cops, and when do we want them now? And all this led to this culmination of officers just being a target. We saw even recently, 2 weeks ago, all over the nation, it seemed like every other day a police officer was being shot and killed. You saw, I believe, Detective Seals in Jersey City PD doing his job, 5 kids, gunned down. And you don't see the politicians coming out and saying, we have to stop this. And this goes back to the Obama administration, when every single day
Cambridge,
he was up there and denouncing the work of police officers and saying that it was a targeted effect, and it wasn't. Ed, you have much more time on than me. I'm still a rookie on this job, but police work is not always pretty. There's going to be people that resist. And my dad was a cop, and he said, Joe, you always treat everyone with respect no matter what. But when someone raises the bar, that's when you raise the bar. And there comes a point when people call us because they feel alone and they need help, and it's the last resort, that you have to go there. And someone's going to, if he just smacked up his wife or his child, what do you think he's going to do to you? Right. So you're going to go out there and you're going to have to wrestle and put the individual under arrest. But my opinion as a leader, especially a mayor of a city, is you don't take sides. And that's what they did for many years. And they threw an officer under the bus right away. We saw it with one of our officers, in Hugh Barry, who did his job. And, Hugh was a police officer in the 7th when I was a sergeant. Great guy, always did his job, followed procedure. And right away, he said that we failed the city. We didn't fail the city. Hugh didn't fail the city. It was a terrible situation that none of us wanted to be in. And you have to make a split-second decision. But that does not mean that that individual was wrong, or that they were racist, or they did it for a bad reason. Right. And that's the problem. Everyone jumps the gun nowadays, and it's got to stop.
Well, look, I've gotten to know you for the past couple of years, so if you're being labeled racist, you're not. And I know what you're doing. Bob has been around a long time, probably, I came on somewhere close in the early 80s, and we've experienced a lot of different politics, different mayors, different police commissioners. I think I've been through 12 police commissioners, and, numerous mayors that date back to those time periods. We've seen the transformation of the city. We've seen a lot of different violence, and we've seen the change in the city. You bring up a good point about elected officials who, their job is to be leaders, but they choose to sit back. They choose to play to the smaller group with the biggest voice, because I call it as being weak in character. I think de Blasio is weak in character. I think he's weak in intelligence, but I also think he's weak in character because he doesn't stand for anything that he believes in. And, other mayors that we've experienced, I never thought that I'd be sitting back saying, bring David Dinkins back. He was probably the worst mayor we dealt with up until de Blasio. But he at least stood for something, and he stuck to what he believed in. And he tried for whatever abilities he had to do that. And you were around for the Crown Heights riots and the stuff that occurred. We are losing this on the elected officials, and it's organizations like yours, it's organizations like the one that I represent, and the cops that are in other organizations across the country who give law enforcement that voice. Now, I believe that the people, the majority of the people in this nation, but in this city, support police officers. I believe that. I think that what elected officials are doing is they're placating to that tiny little voice that has the ability to tie up a big city. And they tie up the big city because those elected officials don't have the gonads to draw a line in the sand and say, we have laws on the books and we're enforcing them. And Bob, you've been through this over the years. You've seen this.
A lot of the hypocrisy that we saw in the 80s and the early 90s we're seeing again with our elected officials, and that always begs the question that Ed and I discuss often. And Joe, give us your perspective. You're a little younger than us. Is feckless leadership really leadership at all?
Well, I say it all the time in a lot of my interviews, is you have these politicians stand in front of a podium and spew hate and nonsense and lies, and people that are misinformed in a lot of these communities believe it, and they go to the extreme. They'll go out there and believe that all police officers are bad, and that's what happens when you see it all the time. You saw it in the water bucket incident where people didn't care anymore and just throwing water blatantly on police. You saw it with the gallon of milk being thrown, and you saw it in the subway station when the officer was fighting 5 of those individuals that were drunk in the subway station all alone, and people don't know any better. And I think we need to do a better job of going out there and informing them. It's always a policy change, or police have to go to training. But the problem is the communities don't necessarily have that training. And I believe, and Ed, correct me if I'm wrong, neighborhood policing has always been around, right? There's been CPOP and all this stuff.
It's been around forever.
And NCOs come along, and it's the greatest thing since
just
sliced
changing
bread.
the name.
Right. But at the same time, the people that we're playing into already usually love the police and support us.
No doubt.
The people we're going into and giving these toys to, a lot of the times, not always, they may be underprivileged or whatnot, but they're good people. Right. But what about the individuals that don't care about us, that are still going to keep doing it? And you change these policies and you give them body cameras and all this stuff, and now they want to turn around with the body cameras and say it's racist when it's not playing into their favor. And bad guys, in my opinion, I say it all the time, criminals are not going to stop doing bad things. So we can't be handcuffing our officers and making them second guess and putting themselves in the front line and worry about being the next Ron L. Singh on the day after Christmas getting shot and killed with an 8-month-old because they're afraid to go up there or let their guard down, because it's more about handing out presents and lip sync battles and dancing on camera than going out there and believing police officers. And, you know, like you said with the mayors, they need to go up there, and unless there's something really showing that the cop did something wrong, you don't take a stand. You go up there and say, listen, you know, at this time it is a tragedy, but we're going to let the process play out. Don't condemn the officer. Don't tell them they were wrong.
A lot of times, and I could tell you unequivocally, you mentioned Sergeant Barry earlier on, Mayor de Blasio knew the facts of the case that night. We knew the facts of the case that night. We knew that the lady who was shot by Sergeant Barry had a long history of mental illness, chasing her neighbors around with baseball bats. They knew that. But he chose to play to the city because he didn't have the courage to stand up and call it for what it was.
And that's the misinformation.
And then he took his puppet O'Neill, handed O'Neill a piece of paper. They asked O'Neill, what are you going to say about this? And he gave him his statement. They said, no, you're not. Mayor's press man gave him a piece of paper and said, this is what you're going to say. Now, I know that happened as a fact. I was told by the people in that room of what happened. This thing was a sellout from the beginning. When the truth of the matter is, the city of New York dropped the ball on Deborah Dana, who was a mentally ill person who needed help. And she was put through the system numerous times. And we see this across the country on a regular basis, where we're victimizing the cop, and we need better training. But, you know, it's kind of funny because the blame in that case lied on we didn't call emergency service. Of the thousands and thousands and thousands of calls that come into the city of New York, and I'm going back to 1982 when I started, it's the same practice today that it was in 1982, no matter what the piece of paper is that they got in a patrol guide. And everybody that tells you different is guilty of lying.
And I'm glad you brought that up, Ed, because I want to go on record, and you know, whoever's going to be listening to this,
It's the place to go.
I want to defend you a little bit, because last week you said something and people took it out of context, and I knew right away. And you were speaking about the incident of the girl that was murdered, you know, and it had nothing to do with your remarks. Had nothing to do with her. It was pretty much letting the city know and letting the mayor that because you're allowing this city to run rampant, this is what happened. It had nothing to do with downplaying, saying it wasn't a tragedy, and I knew right away where they were going with it. And just like you said, when he put the paper in front, this was his opportunity to spin it around and make you out to be the bad guy when it had nothing to do with that. And that's politics firsthand, just like
Listen, I give him credit. You know, it's a 15-round fight you got to think about. So he got his jab and he got his point, but that doesn't change the narrative of what the facts are. And the facts in this case will come out. And I like to use the example of small fires. You know, you get a little fire in a wastebasket. If you don't put it out, next thing the room's on fire. You don't put it out, next thing the whole house burns down. There's a point of what's occurring in the streets of New York. If you have a child from anywhere in the world that's coming to one of these universities here in New York, and Columbia University, Bernard College, one of the most prestigious in the country, they're coming here as a parent, as every parent watching this, You want to know if your kid is safe. I get calls from elected officials from around the nation. I get them from law enforcement from around the nation asking what type of areas certain schools are. And they do that. Why? Because they care. They care about their child. It's their most precious belonging in life. And they want to know where my kid is going. And contrary to whether we can say my kid does drugs, doesn't do drugs, smokes pot, doesn't smoke pot, it's irrelevant. Nobody should be murdered for that.
Correct.
Nobody should. Okay. But at the end of the day, sometimes parents aren't privy to what really takes place. And they find out tragically, they find out, through harder times, but that's the end result. But we, as law enforcement, as all of us, have an obligation to protect lives.
Correct.
And tell the truth. And in this case, we're going to let it unravel, but the truth has not been told. And I know that the truth has not been told.
Joe, what do you attribute to Blue Lives Matter literally taking off like meteorically? Before you knew it, it just seemed to be this it was almost a national movement itself.
I never, and I'll tell you today, I never imagined it going to where it is today, being a household name. And I went to a fundraiser with the guitarist for Springsteen the other day for the DA and Thumbs Wide Open. And I don't realize, and Ed, I think you'll agree with this too, when you're in front of a camera, just like you in the movie, you don't realize how many people you're influencing by what you say or what you do. And so many people come up nowadays and they'll walk up to me and they'll shake my hand and I'll give them like the side eye and they're like, you don't know me. And that puts me at ease because I don't want to disrespect the person if I saw him a bunch of times, but they'll be like, we love what you do. Thank you for standing up for us. And that's what keeps me going. And as police officers, when you first come on, and I came on in 2006, you were always told, stay in your box, don't go outside of it. You're a cop, that's all you are. You can't have a second job. You can't, whatever the case may be. And they kind of brainwash you to not try to be more, other than if you take a test or something like that. I didn't want that. I wanted to make more of myself, and I want to make a difference. And one day, and I never imagined it, being put on a national stage, on TV, I want to go out there one day and get into politics. And God bless the assemblymen and councilmen for worrying about the parks and the stop signs and speed bumps. But I want to go out there and make a difference. And if someone like the mayor we have in now can make it, you put your mind to it with great intentions and show people you care no matter what side of the aisle or political party you're with. And I think you can make a difference, and that's the ultimate goal.
Too bad you didn't mention this 2 years ago. We might have drafted you running. Talking about the shock factor and making a difference, and all of a sudden you're in front of a microphone when everybody's saying, "Hey, doing a great job." You meet Vice President Pence.
Yes, I did. That was incredible.
Come out of police academy, new guy, all excited, running around playing cops and robbers. Next thing, bam, you're talking to the Vice President of the United States.
That was incredible. He came to New York City. He was invited to the White House. He wasn't invited. The football team won a championship and was asking if they could be invited, but he was going to be in New York. So he came and visited at One Police Plaza, and I was hiding in the back of the room, and a lot of people said, "Joe, you need to go up to him." I said, "No, I'm going to wait back in the back of the room." And as fate would have it, he starts walking my way, and I had one of my coins for the Blue Lives founder, and I gave it to him, and he looks down, and as everyone knows, Pence and Trump, they love Fox, and he goes, "I know exactly who you are." He goes, "You're doing an amazing job, and it's incredible what you do, and this coin's going to be in the White House tomorrow." And just, I don't think that the vice president would know who I am or what I do or the organization I stand for, and that was incredible. And that's a huge accomplishment. And the goal is hopefully to, meet President Trump one day. And even though I didn't agree with a lot of his practices, I was flown out to meet President Obama, and that's just an honor in itself, meeting a president. And we'll see. It's incredible what things have become of and what's going to happen in the future.
What you just said is actually the right way to look at it. That whether you're a pro-Trump, pro-Obama, pro-any president, the idea is that that individual is the president of this nation. And whether you're in their politics, not in their politics, the idea is to give the chair the respect, whether they're active or former presidents. And, you're lucky, it's a great experience. I kind of have a similar shock factor. And, I've been invited to the White House, met President Bush a few times and Vice President Cheney. And then you sit there, and it's kind of funny is because, you mentioned earlier the police department, follow the rules, don't do this, don't think outside the box. And then because you thought outside the box, you're now meeting with the President of the United States, Vice President of the United States. So you sit there and you're like, I went through this job, I'm just a cop, and I'm standing in the Oval Office that runs the world, when you really think about that. And it's really a nice experience. It's a nice accomplishment. And the truth of the matter is, you're meeting a president that's governing a world. So you're lucky is, you got two under your belt. I got to play catch up.
And what's cool, Ed, is when you're in a room with those people, and you do it all the time, and I see everything that you do and the people you're around, you realize they're human too, and it's not that they're any better. It's just you have to work just as hard, if not harder, to try to keep up on that level, and that's the goal. And hopefully people follow you, and you change lives in the process by doing it.
And that's a point to be made that with cops, and I say this all the time to all the new sergeants and people I talk to. This morning, all three of us got up, put our pants on the same way. We all got up for the purpose of a paycheck, to do something that we enjoy in life, with the idea of I get paid and I can go enjoy my time with my family. The meaning in that is that we're all people. We just have different professions. And we, as cops, we often look at other people that way, because we go from meeting the President of the United States or the Vice President to some homeless person, and it changes for us. So our experience is so diverse in so many different ways that you have to adapt, and you get a real balance, in total balance of what's out there.
Main thing is staying humble through it all, no matter what your accomplishments or downfalls are. You could be on either side of that line, and just go out there trying to stay positive. It's not always easy. With this job, we see it with, the divorce rate. We see it with people getting sick and people passing away, and 9/11 still claiming lives. And you just got to be grateful, and it's not always easy. It's not easy for me. Sometimes I wake up and say, well, why'd this happen even now? And you got to keep pushing, because if you don't, someone else is going to take the reins and run ahead, and you're going to be there's the next Tom Brady waiting in the shadows.
That's always what happens. Joe, how do we do a better job of educating both the public and, I think to some degree, the police officer, of being able to work together? You mentioned earlier on about community police and NCO program. I think that when you graduate the police academy, you're already in community police. And if you're trained properly and you understand about being humble, and you come from a respectful, moral background, you just understand to treat people in a good way. And that was the experience I had coming out of the police academy. There was no community policing. It was a matter of being respectful. Now, every new commissioner comes up with some idea to get his ass kissed and sits back with a new program, and it doesn't work that way. It really doesn't work that way. It works by having highly professional police officers that understand people. So how do we change the minds of the public to see the cops for what you and I know, what Bob knows the cops are? How do we get that to change? And how do we get the cops to realize that every person you stop isn't necessarily a perp? And I don't think we truly believe that, but that perception of what's out there is something we're fighting.
Now, I just hope no one takes this the wrong way that's listening, but we already go above and beyond for the public, which we should. But we don't do enough for the men and women in uniform. And that's a problem when we're expected to always, yes, it's a selfless job and you're always going to put yourself in harm's way, but what about the mental process?
Correct.
What about worrying about the bills, worrying about divorce, worrying about your sick kid? What about the morale? No one's focused on the morale. You talk about it, and this is what we're doing for the job, and you hear it nationwide because you talk to a cop, whether in New York or California, it's the same thing. And of course cops, they're all stubborn, and the stupid thing, we want a better raise. Well, that's only one part of it, but what about really enjoying it? Right. Being supervisors, we know that if you make your police officers feel appreciated, they're going to go above and beyond and not even realize it. And we could do that as a whole, as a city, whether it's our political leaders or our activists. But within, I think we need more people not just going out there and telling you, you go to BMOC, right? And I remember it had nothing to do with the sergeants coming and talking to us, but other people. And right away, well, don't do this because you're going to get in trouble, and don't do that because you're going to get jammed up. And it's like, wait a minute, I'm proud that I'm getting this shield and moving up, but you're telling me everything I do, I'm going to get in trouble for. No, make them feel appreciated, make them feel excited to go out there and be a leader. And you got to do that in all ranks. And I think a lot of the guys with the white shirts on this job forget that. They forget the human side, and they forget that if they just came out of their office and went to the desk and said thank you, or hey, that job, and it doesn't have to be an arrest. It could be that EDP job that you did. You did a phenomenal job, and the cop's like, wait a minute, this person knows me by first name, and they feel appreciated. They don't just feel like a number. They don't feel like they're chasing things. And I think people out there, if you're a supervisor listening to, be a leader. These guys look up to you. A lot of guys are afraid to step in and say, hey, don't do that. Or, hey, that's not the right way. Or just teach them. When I came from the 7-0, we were running around. People hated me in the 7-0 because it was the Abner Louima house. And I wasn't even there. I wasn't even working as a cop. And people would still say how much they hated us for that. But you still got to go out there and do your job, at the same time, but have supervisors that are going to lead you. Because when I came to the 7th in Manhattan, it's a different ballgame. No one wanted to put their hands on people. It was all about going out there and, raise it, kissing babies and things like that. And it's crazy. But what I did is I took my SNU mentality and I went and showed these cops how to be officers, how to do it respectfully, but not be afraid to get the bad guys off the street, because that's what the people in these communities want.
There's a difference for the men and women in the NYPD or in any organization between leadership and supervision. You could hold a rank of supervisor and it's titled, but you could be a terrible leader, and you could be a member in a squad, another police officer in a squad, who is more respected than your supervisor and have a greater impact on your peers than your supervisor. So going forward, we have all kinds of issues. You mentioned the negativity of this job. I've highlighted many times, and I don't know if you were military, Marine, or
No, I
Bob.
wasn't.
I don't know if you were military. No. Me either. But in the Marine Corps, somebody pointed this out to me, that the Marines, if you are, it's called a former Marine, not an ex-Marine, it's a former Marine. 20 years ago, they are always Marines. And what's interesting, if you look around at any of the recruiting material that the Marines put out, never once do they say join the Marines. You never see those words. They sell an image, a uniform, they show pride, they show tradition, they show all of the things that this department has, actually, but they never use those words. And in wartime, they have the largest amount of recruitment than all the branches of service. So there's something being lost that we're not doing in this department. And, you highlight the academy. And when I went through the academy, and I'm going to guess they did this with you, one of the instructors came in and said, the highest rate of suicide, divorce, and alcoholism is in the police department. So, show of hands, these 3 things are going to affect you. And I remember sitting there saying, what am I doing here? Like, this is what you're selling me. And we don't do what you just said. I think that our supervisors, our brass people, we lack leadership, understanding, empathy. We eat our own out of fear of media and political backlash, rather than standing up and saying, this is what happened. If you're a surgeon, we're all surgeons, and someone dies on the table right now, sorry, I lost them. You maybe get sued, you don't get sued. You fire a shot, something happens, we got a problem, we kill someone, modify, take your gun, pressure, and we throw you into limbo. Kenny Boss, who just retired, was involved in the Amadou Diallo shooting back with the 42 shots, 44 shots. Lima shots. Diallo. He just retired, and he was kept hidden on his job for almost 20 years. And he did his time in the military. He finally was promoted to sergeant, worked at aviation, and rescued numerous people swinging from a helicopter. So, what took place, is an accident in some ways, and yet we bury a person. And, no one ever had the understanding to sit back and look at it differently. How many more lives might have been saved if this guy wasn't tied up, I just think we do it wrong.
Joe, I have one question for you that I think is really relevant. A cop gets killed, whether it's here or somewhere else in the country, and they're beside themselves. They're traumatized, and then at some point, not soon afterwards, you show up. You greet the family, say, "Hi, I'm Joe. I'm from New York City. Blue Lives Matter. I have a check for you. I'm here for you. My organization is here for you. We love you. We want to help you." That's got to be tremendously rewarding for you. And what's the reaction of these families who are besieged with grief?
Well, first of all, to be able to go out there and put a smile on the family's face, because that's what it is. As police officers, the worst thing that could ever happen is a knock on your door, a telephone call saying that your loved one's not coming home. And every time they hear the knock on the door, the doorbell ring, the phone go off, it brings them back to that time. And if we could show up at their family's house and put a smile on their face and let them know that not every phone call or knock on the door is going to be a bad thing, could start putting them in a positive direction, on a positive route, that's a big accomplishment. But like they say, no good deed goes unpunished. There's a lot of people when you get more credible or noticed out there that will always try to go after you and try to make it seem like you're doing something bad when you're not. You're just doing positive stuff. And, running a huge foundation.
Let me raise a question, and you just tickle the thought. I may be off on some of the facts, but going back a little bit, where there was some accusations flying around that Blue Lives Matter was collecting monies that they shouldn't be collecting or were miscollecting, and it kind of created a little bit of a cloud over the integrity. I remember calling you on this. Sure. And saying, hey, what's going on? It's
funny because I was speaking with my driver today, and so when Brian Simonson was shot and killed, right, we sold 7,000 shirts, and we raised $50,000 for the family, and that was huge. That was the biggest amount. I don't think, other than an insurance policy, I don't think there was anyone else out there that even came close to it. But every little bit counts. It doesn't matter if you raise $1 or whatever. Everyone's doing a great thing. But people don't realize the expenses you have. People aren't giving you shirts for free. They don't know like you do. In the back end, things pop up and you're responsible for it. So if shirts go missing or whatever the case is, guess what? We're responsible for laying out the money to make the situation right. And when Brian Mulkeen was passed away, a lot of people that were misinformed and start making stories up and saying that, well, people didn't know about it, which of course was a lie because we get in touch with the supervisor directly responsible and asked for his input, and everyone knew. The trustee from the Bronx knew. And, there's foundations out there that put in their 2 cents because everyone's out there instead of working together. That's the problem with this job sometimes. And officers, they forget that it's better with power and numbers. You'll accomplish a lot more, but certain people just want the spotlight, and everything they said was false. And a narrative goes around, and when I was able to confront the person in a nice way, and they realized they were completely wrong, when they refused to go and send a text message out like they first did, saying that there was just misinformation, they said they were just going to go and do it word of mouth. So they wanted to save face. But you know what? At the end of the day, you don't want 100% compliance because then you're a dictator and people are afraid of you. You want to have both sides kind of sort of because it just goes to show that it's not just partisan. And we're not going to stop. I said it then, I say it now. We're going to go and help as many people as possible. We're going to help people, whether on the East or West Coast. And like I said, God has a plan, and it's just more motivation to smile, even though it's hard at times. Sometimes it really hits you hard because you're really going above and beyond to try to make a difference when they don't see how hard it is. But you got to be that shining light. Getting to the top isn't going to be easy. It wasn't meant to, or everyone won't be there. And if one day I'm able to get there and smile and say, you know what, I was able to come across all the adversity and get to this point, people are going to respect that even more than if I just rolled over and gave up.
Well, you should be wanting to be judged in the future based on your history rather than being judged in the present without being allowed to fulfill where you're looking to go. And I think a lot of people make that mistake. They have an immediate reaction. Sometimes it's territorial. Things but issues of integrity, I know they're important, especially when you're accounting for monies, especially monies for cops.
Especially police officers get a little that way. But you know what, though? You give everything to the lawyer and accountant at the end of the day. End of the day, let them figure it out. And listen, I know in my heart that I'm doing great things. And I think there's more, like you said. It's always that small percentage that seem like have the loudest voices sometimes.
Squeaky wheel.
Yep, and we just got to get over it. You're doing something right, put your head down, grit it out, and get it done.
So Blue Lives Matter, where's it going now? I mean, you've grown, you raised over $1 million. Where do you see it, a year from now, 5 years from now?
Fraternal organizations in the police department are phenomenal, but we've ended up becoming an organization for these little fraternals to look up to and set the standard. And that's the goal. The goal is for people to look up and say, I want to be like them. I want to have the work ethic they have. I want to be that leader that Joe has become. I want to be able to raise the bar and do things differently and show the human side. And the goal is just to keep on growing, just to show the positive side, to influence and show the public that not all police officers are bad, that police officers do good things, not just in uniform and even off. And we're human. We're just like them. And if we can help, and the ultimate goal is to remember all the loved ones lost, because you've heard it many times before, these families just want to know that their loved ones aren't going to be forgotten. And if we can keep that promise and do it in a really great and respectable manner while having some fun doing it, I think we're succeeding.
Do you feel that there's a certain time where, some days you're battling, and there's some days I go home and I almost want to just be like, I can't believe this is happening. But then I get that email, I get that text, and it's almost like it's a gift from God. It appears with the words of just keep doing what you're doing. It's appreciated. And that is like get back in the ring again. You find that happens.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because it's happened many, many times. And out of the blue, you'll get a text message or an email. And the ones that affect me the most are the ones that don't even live in New York City that are reaching out to me from, say, Dakota or California. And they're like, we're watching exactly what you're doing and stay the course. And nothing you do goes unnoticed. And it makes you realize that what you're doing is having a positive effect on people. I think we've gotten past the point, and people have forgotten about role models, someone to look up to, someone to keep chasing. And I think it was Matthew McConaughey. He said it in one of his speeches when he got an award. He said, someone to look up to. And he goes, my hero is someone that's always going to be 10 years ahead of me. It's going to be me. But I'm always going to be chasing that person. I'm never going to be that person. Right. But it gives me something to keep looking forward to. And that's what we have to do. Don't give up and give yourself a reason to chase something and hit that goal. And don't just stop at that goal. Keep on setting more and more and more.
I agree. You mentioned earlier an interest in politics. That sounded like you're interested in running for something.
I would absolutely love to. And I think
like state, local, national.
You know what I feel at? I think there's nothing more political than being given a gun and a badge and being told to do it properly and correctly for your entire career. And if you could do it, I don't think there's anything that could stop you or be more political than having to save a life or take a life in a matter of seconds. And not any of these politicians, especially the big ones, have ever walked in any of our shoes or in the shoes of the heroes that lost their lives. And, I think the sky's the limit. And seeing the way New York is, and seeing the great people from all different walks of life that I become friends with. And you hear it all the time, the qualms and the stuff that people would like to change. Maybe one day, maybe City Hall and Gracie Mansion have a spot for me, but I have a little bit more of a ways to go.
There's a vacancy right now. There's a giant hole in the City Hall right now.
But it's good because if people keep messing up of that caliber, when you come in, you could be the knight in shining armor and people are going to really appreciate you for it.
So what's the secret? What would you say if you had to pick out one or two things that you would highlight as important for leadership and doing what you're doing? What would the top two items be that you would suggest?
The number one thing would be to be humble. That's the most important thing ever. It's no matter if it's Joe Imperatrice from Staten Island or the sergeant or the founder of Blue Lives, it's always realizing that you're human, just like everybody else. And you've been in big rooms and spoke to many people and been on national stages speaking, but you still go home at the end of the night and just like everybody else, you're alone. You're laying down a lot of times, you're alone. You're no different than anybody else. You get hungry, you feel pain, you get sad. And no matter how many good achievements you get, stay humble because the people around you who see that are really going to appreciate it more than you'll ever know. A lot of times people don't say things, but just like me, I have role models, my dad and people I looked up to, someone like yourself that you wouldn't know, but appreciate so much of what you do. And just because I don't say it doesn't mean that I don't feel it. And that's you want people. You want to influence their lives. Some people say, well, if I could influence one person, well, what happens if you can influence a lot more and make this world a better place? I don't know if I have a second. That's my number one is staying humble.
What about you, Bob?
I think that you've already accomplished a lot of those things.
Thank you.
And you've developed an idea into a national movement. And I think maybe I'm grateful that you're humble, but you have a lot to brag about.
Oh, thank you very, very much. It means a lot to me. And, Ed, with anything you guys ever need, and the SBA, if you need me to come out and, speak when you guys go to, like, the new promotions or whatever the case is, I'm always willing to help because you guys you guys stand firsthand. Anything that we need, you guys are there. And if I could play my part and help with whatever platform I have, I'm willing to help these people. We saw the suicides this past year, and it didn't just claim the lives of one rank. It claimed the lives of many. And I think on average it's close to 148 to 152 officers that take their own lives every single year, and one is too many. But if we can help at that area, if we could help and make our supervisors and our cops get excited to come to work and make this city even better than what it is, that's number one.
We're going to talk more about that, and I'd like to probably bring you back because we are aggressively working on a program for suicide for police officers, and I'm very much like you in a sense that, I'm NYPD, but I'm all for the cops, and I don't care what rank. I'm open to people from across the country. If they have an issue, we'll help them. And, NYPD, we're the biggest. Everybody looks at us, and we need to start working closer together with everyone else. But this is a real issue. It's a serious issue, and I think we can create better police officers, but we need to take care of our own before we can continue to keep going out and taking care of others. And we've done a terrible job of that. And we're going to roll out some good stuff, some really good stuff, and we should share some thoughts on this. I think we could do a lot.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. And once again, just thank you for even considering me to come on and be able to speak and be able to highlight a lot of things with both you gentlemen, because it goes a long way. And we have a lot of work to do. And as long as people out there, even if it's not working with the SBA or Blue Lives, just in general in your neighborhoods with your families, just to go out there and make a little bit of a difference is going to go a long way. So once again, just thank you very, very much.
We're not done yet. We're going to keep going, right? Well, I want to thank everyone. Joe, I want to thank you for taking the time, sharing what Blue Lives Matter is about and how it all started. I'll start from the Irishman. Bob, thank you for participating.
This is our real star right here. And Joe, can you just tell the viewer, how they can get in contact with your organization?
Absolutely. So our website is www.bluelivesmatternyc.org. You can follow us on Facebook, Blue Lives Matter -NYC with the angel wings, at Blue Lives NYC. Anything you see, if you want to volunteer, if you want to support, you can go to those sites. And thank you for everyone out there that appreciates and supports us.
Joe is often seen on Fox News and also the Joe Piscopo Show. You're a regular. So good work.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Keep doing what you're doing. And thank you for listening and watching. And we will see you again on Inside Blue 360. Thank you.